Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. With your permission, two questions. In March 2024, a year and a half ago, you said in a video on your social networks that we cannot complete the victory without the IDF entering Rafah in order to eliminate the remaining Hamas battalions. You also said in an interview with CBS a year and a half ago that after we begin the operation in Rafah, the operation in Gaza will be completed within weeks, but we can't leave the last Hamas stronghold unaddressed. The question is, what went wrong along the way?
Nonetheless, with the decision in early March to stop sending humanitarian aid to the Strip to pressure Hamas, almost 6 months later, this has hurt international support. It exposes you and the ministers to the risk of arrest in countries that are signatories of the Geneva Conventions for harming civilian populations or withholding essential humanitarian aid. And primarily, it hasn't led to the return of the hostages. You've mentioned many strategic successes. Do you agree this was a strategic mistake?
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. With your permission, two questions. In March 2024, a year and a half ago, you said in a video on your social networks that we cannot complete the victory without the IDF entering Rafah in order to eliminate the remaining Hamas battalions. You also said in an interview with CBS a year and a half ago that after we begin the operation in Rafah, the operation in Gaza will be completed within weeks, but we can't leave the last Hamas stronghold unaddressed. The question is, what went wrong along the way?
You asked what happened after the capture of Rafah. What happened was that we achieved victories. I said we were on the verge of victory. We achieved tremendous victories. We achieved a huge victory in Lebanon. Currently, a new government that came in as a result of our victory is working to dismantle Hezbollah's weapons. No one thought of this when I spoke about it, but I did think of it. We achieved a huge victory in Syria because our actions shook the Assad regime. There were those who said, "Why hurry? What's the rush?" I said we must go in quickly, and afterwards, we achieved a great victory over Iran that will go down for generations. So, it's not that we sat doing nothing. We achieved tremendous things in the time since Rafah, including in the Philadelphia corridor, which some said could not be seized, and that we could not get hostages released that way, as Hamas insisted, etc. All of these things we did. But now we must complete the job. First, the main component. Maybe some in Europe and even in Israel have forgotten October 7th. I haven't. I am not willing to let these murderers, these monsters, exactly as Ohad wrote, stay there. We will eliminate them exactly as he asked me to do. He did not speak in your tone. He spoke in line with me and most of citizens of Israel. And if you ask them, are you willing for Hamas to remain there, to be able to rearm, to reorganize, to be just beyond the fence, to be able to raid Nairam, the kibbutzim, Steret, Ofakim again? Of course not. They are not willing, and I am not willing. Therefore, we will finish the job, with God's help, soon.
Nonetheless, with the decision in early March to stop sending humanitarian aid to the Strip to pressure Hamas. Almost 6 months later, this has hurt international support. It exposes you and the ministers to the risk of arrest in countries that are signatories of the Geneva Conventions for harming civilian populations or withholding essential humanitarian aid. And primarily, it hasn't led to the return of the hostages. You've mentioned many strategic successes. Do you agree this was a strategic mistake?
First, you have to understand what happened. We did not say we were stopping all entry of humanitarian aid. We said we were stopping, at the same time, the trucks that Hamas was taking over, essentially seizing the bulk of the contents for itself. Yes, taking it for themselves, and then selling the leftovers at exorbitant prices to the Palestinian population, and in doing so actually recruiting new terrorists. They would tell a Palestinian woman, "You want this flour? Give me your 15-year-old son." This is how they sustained their war machine. Therefore, we wanted to prevent this, and said we would prevent it. And at the same time, we would set up distribution points through the American-operated JHF, Joint Humanitarian Fund, to distribute the food. So we didn't want to create famine. On the contrary, we wanted to bypass Hamas's looting and theft. But it did not work as we intended. It did not succeed because there were not enough distribution points, etc. So we learned the lesson, stopped that approach, and now we are acting differently. Aid is coming in, and we are doing our best to ensure that most of it does not pass through Hamas's hands. At the same time, we are increasing the number of distribution points, the secured routes, and also airdrops, which usually do not reach Hamas. There is no famine, no famine. There was no famine and no policy of starvation. I said today in the press conference, if we had wanted famine, if that had been our policy, 2 million Gazans would not be alive today after 20 months. The same goes for genocide. If we had wanted genocide, it would have taken exactly one afternoon. There is no famine. There is no policy of starvation. There was a shortage, and it had to be stopped, and we are stopping it. One can argue about whether we acted too late. I certainly think we should not have eased the situation earlier. But you know, when you get into a situation, it's another test of leadership. You entered a tight spot. You said something. You quoted something. You change it. Yes, change it. Change it and get out, especially when we are facing a campaign about famine. Not necessarily about shortages, about famine. Don't let this campaign beat you. It will take time to get out of this. I know the international problems. I've also said to leaders in Europe, heads of state, leaders, they tell me, "Listen, Bibi." Yes, there's familiarity between us. Bibi, we know the facts. We know the truth. But we cannot stand up to our public opinion and our media. And I told them, then you're not leaders. We will not commit suicide because you have a problem standing up to hostile media or to radical minorities and Islamists pressuring you in your countries. We will win the war. We will destroy Hamas. And these things will sort themselves out. But one thing we will not do. We will not surrender. And I will not surrender to hostile propaganda and to anything that endangers our security, not from outside pressure and not from inside pressure.